So one of our versions of this, when it comes to waking up, we talk about this idea of being on the Titanic. So let's imagine that when you're in the old world, everyone's on the Titanic and everyone's pretending like the ship isn't sinking. Everything's just fine. We'll just keep doing what we're doing. And imagine that as the ship is going down, everyone continues to drink their drinks and play the violins and play the music and innocently believe that if I just rearrange the deck furniture of my life, move these chairs and tables around so it fits nicer, everything's going to be fine. And meanwhile, the ship is continuing to sink, but everyone's pretending it isn't. Then you start to catch on in one way, shape, or form. Start looking around, you start investigating. You're a bit too curious. You ask some questions you shouldn't be asking. I know I was like that growing up a lot. I'm sure a lot of you were. And you discover, wait a second, I think this thing's going down. This doesn't make sense. This isn't working. This isn't healthy. This isn't sustainable. This ship, psychologically, macro, micro, is sinking. And so what's the first thing you do is that you try to convince all your family and friends that they need to get off the Titanic and sail to the new world. And lo and behold, that shit don't work, does it? They think you're crazy. They don't know what you're talking about. They think that everything's just fine. Why are you worried? Why are you asking all these questions? And so you find yourself a little lifeboat, and it's called your compass. It's called going out into the unknown, basically. It's a call to adventure that says, look, it's safer on the ship. In fact, maybe it's all you've ever known, but it's clearly sinking. And from your perspective, if you realize that it's time to get off the ship, the lifeboat feels like the only thing that's going to save your ass. But to people who are on the ship and think everything's perfectly fine, the lifeboat obviously is certain death. You're going to get on this little lifeboat and go out into the darkness. How is that a good idea? That's a terrible idea. But if you already know the ship's sinking, then even though that's terrifying, you recognize that it's the only thing that's going to save you. And that could also be in your personal life, right? You go, this leap of faith is terrifying, but the ship of my life is sinking. I have to do something. That starts to seem like the only way out. And you spend a lot of time convincing other people to join you, and that doesn't work. And then eventually you conclude that the only thing you can actually do is to save yourself. And you get on the ship yourself or the little boat, and you start sailing off into the unknown. And it is lonely, and it is dark, and it is, in other stories, it's the desert. It's you go out into the venture and then you're lost and you're afraid and you wish you could go back, but you can't go back. There's always this period of time where you're in the unknown, right? And so you're sailing across these waters and you're not sure where you're going and you're not sure what the hell you're following. And you're following this crazy compass or you're this crazy guidance and no one else seems to be around you. And you're going through the shadows of your own consciousness and your emotions and your unchecked beliefs and all the shit that you haven't ever faced. And you're slowly making your way towards the new world. And somewhere out there, there's actual land. And that is actually safe, far more safe than the ship. But the boat in between is terrifying. Understand that that which you most need will be found in the place where you least want to go looking. That's a very old idea as well, but it's always the case. If I make that leap, I'll be alone. So then you're called to confront being alone. And you don't know how much you might actually need that. Because it's not just about facing being alone. That's a piece of it. But it's also, even more importantly, about becoming the type of person who can face their own fears and shadows. And so understand that every time you tackle something that you're afraid of, right? It's like it's not just that you get the reward of doing the thing, you get the reward of becoming the type of person that can do those things. And that's way bigger than just the thing, right? It's the same idea of, the hero who goes to slay the dragon. Your life is peppered with dragons all over the place. You have external dragons and internal dragons. You can go on a hero's journey outside of yourself, or you can go on one inside of yourself, and you grow and evolve the same way. It doesn't really matter. In reality, you do both. And so you take action externally and then you do inner work internally and then vice versa. And you need both sides. But every time that you take on an internal dragon or an external dragon and you slay it, you grow in your power and your capacity as the type of person who can take stuff like that on. And the next one, you're more willing to take it on. And the next one, you're more willing to take it on. And that is the true power. If there's something in you that you're afraid to look at, especially internally, what you're saying to yourself subconsciously is that it's bigger than me, so I can't look at it. The shadow is bigger than me. I don't want to face it. I don't want to deal with it. I'll just pretend it's not there. I'll just avoid it. And you're saying to yourself all the time that that dragon is bigger than who I am. And the moment that you decide to start to look at it, you pull all that shit out of the fog and you just sit with it, you start to tell yourself that I'm actually capable of at least facing it directly. And then that turns into I'm actually capable of taking it on. I'm capable of going beyond it. I'm capable of growing and transforming. And what that tells you is that you're actually bigger than it. And you grow in your character as a result. And you over time become a little dragon slayer. And then you start taking everything on. And then your life transforms. So each and every one of you have something internally or externally that you're afraid to look at and take on. And it won't leave you, for one. And for two, better to face it directly, face forward, than to let it sneak up from behind you and take you on its own. You know, it's like, well, I'm afraid to lose the money, so I won't, but I'm afraid to take that on and follow my dreams and see what's possible there. Well, then maybe one day you just lose your job anyways, or the economy collapses anyways. And then the dragon, it finds you as opposed to you finding it. And then you're unprepared and you're not ready because you didn't have your armor on and your shield ready and your sword ready and all that stuff. You didn't go to the dragon's lair. You waited for it to find you in your bed. So you all have something like that. It's either inside or outside. A lot of times it's both. A lot of times if you take on something internally, like let's say I'm going to go inside and do some inner work on my fear of being alone, and I take on the shadow internally. And then after you release some of that, you're then called to act externally. And now you have to go take it on in the outside world and go make that leap as well. So you need both. You can't only do one usually. If I have an issue with my relationship and I resolve what's going on inside, that's great. But I'm also called to go have that conversation with my partner at some point. I can't only go have the conversation with my partner because I'm probably going to just blame them because I'm not looking at what's going on in me. But I can't only do what's in me and not take on the external piece, the life piece where I do it outside. I have to be willing to do a bit of both. And a lot of this journey of Remember is a bit like that. Finding your compass in these first couple weeks here is like recognizing that it's time to get off the Titanic. And it doesn't matter, by the way, how much you've been on this path, because this journey is a new journey and there's always another step. So you could start to look around and go, I'm called to the next thing. And that's just like saying, I'm getting called to leave the Titanic yet again. This old life, this old version of me, even though it was great at one point, it was my edge. Now it's not. Now it's time to go again. So don't think that if you've begun already that you don't fit in this conversation. You absolutely do. It just depends on where you are. So now you're sailing across. One thing to recognize, though, is that hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people are starting to do the exact same thing themselves. The world's waking up. This last year has been an incredible reflection of that. As crazy and wild and unfortunate and difficult and all the things that it's been, it's also caused a lot of people to start to look in ways they've never been willing to look before, both at what's happening with themselves and how they're living and how they want to live and what's truly important, and at the world at large and what's been happening for a long time that we haven't been looking at. All of it's starting to come to the surface, and a lot more people are recognizing the ship's on fire. And they're considering taking that leap and getting on their little boat and starting their actual journey, their hero's journey. So recognize that even if you feel alone, there's hundreds of thousands of boats out there making their way towards something similar. Everyone on this call is doing that same thing for themselves right now. And we're supporting one another. We're communicating across the water about what we're experiencing and what we're going through and supporting each other, even though the journey is still yours and no one can make it for you. And also consider the possibility that one day you might find land and there's a shit ton of people living out there. Not least of all the masters, the monks, the spiritual leaders, the massive change agents, people who've just been there for a long time, living in the new world, free and awake. The ones we know of, the ones we don't know of, the ones who are alive, the ones who are dead. A lot of people live out there. And there might be an entire new world out there waiting for you, including an entire new version of you. You can also consider that this entire game until you get there is actually just preparation. And your life actually begins once you're there. When you're fully awake, that's not the end of your journey. That's the beginning. That's when everything gets turned on, everything gets real interesting, and then we get to discover what the hell is actually possible for us. That's when life begins. This is training. This is, I was asleep, then I went on a real fucking crazy, long and difficult journey to wake up. And at some point, I'm going to live my life as that, whatever that looks like for you. And then the game begins. Then things get interesting. We've always had reflections of that, obviously. People who represent what it would be like, Buddha and the Christs and the teachers and the Ammas and a lot of other people who've represented the potential of the human being. And if that potential exists, then it exists in you. And you get to decide how much you're going to let that manifest. But it used to be foreshadowing. The occasional master would appear and say, hey, by the way, you're capable of this. And I personally believe that what's happening now is the world continues to wake up because of technology, because of a shift in consciousness, because of necessity, because of a whole bunch of different things. What used to be the occasional few is going to start to become hundreds of thousands. And then that's going to start to become millions. And it's like that 4-minute mile, right? And then everyone's going to start to go, holy shit, this is possible for all of us. And we're each individually going to express what that looks like. And then the impact that's going to have in the world, no one knows. I have no idea. But I know that I can't think of anything more exciting than that potential manifesting on the planet. And I do believe that's what we're up to. And it's not going to take lifetimes. It's going to take a few years from now. One of the reasons why I don't think it'll take that long, by the way, is because if you haven't noticed, the world needs you and your power now, not in 20 years from now. Like, oh, I'm going to go meditate in a cave for 15 years and then I'm going to come back enlightened. It's like, no, you're not, because we need you now. And so you can assume that whatever age you're at, wherever you are in your life, now's the time. And you design this on a higher level for now to be the time, because now's the time for the world. Now, next few years, whatever, now's the time. It's happening now. You can feel it. You can sense it. You can see it. Maybe it's just a whisper, but you can feel it. Something is shifting on the planet in a huge way. And you're here to be a part of that. I know that because you're here. You get to do it any way you want, but you're here to be a part of that. So assume it might not take nearly as long as you thought. This healing journey does not go on forever. It ends, and then something new emerges. And that's part of the fun.